Have you ever noticed that certain people seem to test you again and again, pushing boundaries, making subtle remarks, draining your energy, while others treat you with quiet respect? It's easy to believe this happens because they are stronger, louder, or more confident. But Stoicism teaches something far more unsettling and far more freeing. People don't persist because they are powerful. They persist because they sense an opening. Not an opening in your logic, an opening in your emotional control. Most toxic behavior doesn't begin with cruelty. It begins with observation. A small comment, a minor provocation, a pause to see what happens next. If your face tightens, your voice changes, or you rush to explain yourself, something is silently communicated. Access has been granted. From that moment on, the dynamic is set not by force, but by reaction. Here's the quiet truth Stoic philosophy offers. You don't need to confront. You don't need to defend. You don't need to prove anything. The moment you remove emotional permission, the game collapses. What once felt like harassment begins to lose momentum. What felt personal starts to fade. And what depended on your response slowly disappears. This video is not about changing other people. It's about changing one inner habit that reshapes how others experience you. Just one deliberate shift applied calmly, consistently, can alter who stays, who adjusts, and who quietly steps away. Stay with me. We'll walk through 5 Stoic practices that don't create conflict, don't require explanations, and don't cost you your peace, only your old patterns. And if this path toward calm authority and inner order speaks to you, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Stoic Path. Join us as we continue learning how to live with clarity, restraint, and unshakable self-governance. Now, let's begin with the first practice today. Practice 1. Stop reacting immediately. Most people believe toxic behavior continues because the other person is rude, selfish, or emotionally immature. Stoicism asks you to look deeper and more uncomfortably honest. Toxic behavior continues because it works. And it works not because of what they say, but because of what happens inside you the moment they say it. The first practice is not dramatic. It doesn't involve confrontation, boundaries spoken out loud, or cutting people off. It begins in a much quieter place. The brief moment between stimulus and response. When someone makes a sharp comment, questions your choice, disrespects your time, or subtly provokes you, the body often reacts before the mind catches up. Your face tightens, your tone changes, your chest contracts. You rush to explain, defend, clarify, or correct. From the outside, it may look reasonable, even polite. But from the inside, something crucial has already happened. You've been pulled. This is exactly what Stoic philosophy warns against. Epictetus reminds us that people are disturbed not by things themselves, but by the judgments they form about them. In that instant of reaction, the other person hasn't gained power through force. They've gained it through access to your emotional center. Toxic individuals are rarely interested in truth or resolution. They are testing for leverage. A reaction tells them 3 things at once: that their words landed, that they can influence your state, and that repeating this behavior will likely produce the same result. From that point on, the pattern reinforces itself, not because you are weak, but because the mechanism is predictable. Stopping immediate reaction interrupts this mechanism at its root. This does not mean suppressing emotions or pretending you feel nothing. Stoicism is not numbness, it is governance. The Stoic practice is to insert a pause, small, deliberate, almost invisible. 3 seconds is enough. 1 breath, a silent count, a moment where you refuse to be rushed into expression. In those seconds, you are not deciding what to say. You are deciding who is in control. Marcus Aurelius wrote that you always have the option of having no opinion. This is not indifference, it is discipline. When you pause, you deny the other person the emotional confirmation they are seeking. The conversation loses its fuel. The tension has nowhere to attach. In everyday life, this looks deceptively simple. A colleague makes a dismissive remark in a meeting. Instead of correcting them immediately, you pause. You respond evenly. Okay. A family member uses a condescending tone. Instead of explaining yourself, you say, "That's interesting." A friend pushes your buttons with a familiar comment meant to draw you into old dynamics. You breathe, then reply, "All right." Well, these responses are not passive. They are controlled. They communicate something subtle but powerful. I am present, but I am not available for this exchange. At first, this can feel uncomfortable. Your mind may insist that silence equals weakness, that not responding means losing ground. This is an old conditioning. Stoicism teaches the opposite. The moment you stop reacting on impulse, the balance shifts. The other person often feels it before they understand it. They may repeat themselves, they may escalate slightly, or they may grow uncertain and pull back. Without your emotional energy, the interaction has no direction. This is why this practice works, even if you say very little. You are no longer feeding the dynamic. You are observing it. Seneca warned that nothing is more harmful than letting the mind be carried away by first impressions. Immediate reaction locks you into someone else's tempo. Deliberate response returns the rhythm to you. Over time, something remarkable happens. People who relied on provoking you begin to disengage, not because you confronted them, but because the interaction no longer rewards their behavior. Meanwhile, those who are emotionally mature adjust naturally. They slow down. They speak more carefully. They sense the presence of boundaries without needing them explained. This is the Stoic defense phase. You are not fixing others. You are securing your inner order. And once your reactions are no longer automatic, your presence changes. You feel steadier, less drained, less pulled into unnecessary conflict. The world doesn't become quieter, but it becomes easier to navigate, because fewer people can reach inside you without permission. Stopping immediate reaction is not the end of the path. It is the doorway. Everything else builds on this moment of pause. Practice 2. Stop over-explaining. Over-explaining often disguises itself as kindness, clarity, or responsibility. You tell yourself you're just being thorough. You want to avoid misunderstandings. You want to be fair. But Stoicism asks a sharper question. Who are you trying to convince, and why? When you explain too much, you quietly hand over authority. Not because your reasons are wrong, but because the act of prolonged explanation signals uncertainty about your right to choose in the first place. It invites negotiation where none is required. This is why over-explaining attracts the wrong kind of attention. Toxic dynamics feed on justification. The more you explain, the more room you create for interruption, correction, reinterpretation, and doubt. Your explanation becomes a handle others can grab. What began as your choice turns into a discussion. What should have been a statement becomes a defense. Stoicism teaches the opposite posture. Calm finality without hostility. Marcus Aurelius reminds us to be content to seem what you really are. There is quiet confidence in letting actions stand without ornament. You do not owe a narrative for every decision. You owe yourself coherence. Over-explaining usually appears in familiar moments. You decline an invitation and immediately list reasons. You set a boundary and rush to soften it with context. You say no, then follow it with apologies, backstories, and reassurance. None of this is wrong in isolation, but repeated, it teaches others that your boundaries are provisional. Stoic clarity begins when you recognize a simple truth. Explanations are for collaborators, not for interrogators. If someone asks in good faith, a brief explanation can build trust. But when questions keep coming, why? Are you sure? Can't you just? You are no longer being asked to clarify. You are being asked to concede. This is where the Stoic response becomes deliberately simple. A short sentence, delivered evenly, ends the loop. Because that's what I chose. That doesn't work for me. I'm not available for that. Then silence. Not defensive silence. Not passive silence. Grounded silence. Epictetus warned that if you wish to improve, you must be willing to appear foolish to those who value appearances over integrity. Over-explaining is often an attempt to look reasonable to unreasonable demands. Stoicism asks you to value alignment over approval. At first, this restraint can feel unsettling. The mind protests. What if they misunderstand me? What if they think I'm cold? What if I seem rude? But these fears reveal the deeper issue dependence on external validation. As long as your peace relies on being understood by everyone, you remain vulnerable to those who weaponize misunderstanding. Stopping over-explanation doesn't make you rigid, it makes you precise. In real life, this practice has immediate effects. A colleague who pushes for justifications may grow frustrated when none are offered. A family member accustomed to debating your choices may escalate briefly, then retreat. Without material to work with, manipulation loses traction. Seneca observed that true power is the ability to remain calm when provoked. Over-explaining is often provoked speech pulled out of you before you've decided it's worth giving. By choosing brevity, you choose timing. By choosing timing, you choose power. This does not mean becoming secretive or dismissive. It means matching your level of disclosure to the level of respect in the interaction. Where there is respect, explanation flows naturally. Where there is pressure, explanation ends early. Over time, people learn how to approach you. Some adjust and become more respectful. Some lose interest when they can no longer steer the conversation. This is not loss, it is filtration. Stopping over-explaining restores a fundamental Stoic order. Your life is not a courtroom, and you are not required to argue your own existence. Clarity is not loud. It does not persuade, it stands. And when your words become fewer and steadier, something subtle changes. Your decisions feel lighter, your boundaries feel cleaner, and your presence communicates a truth no explanation ever could. You trust yourself enough to stop talking. Practice 3. Impose quiet consequences. Most people think boundaries fail because they aren't stated clearly enough. Stoicism offers a calmer, more effective truth. Boundaries fail when they have no consequences. Not loud ones, not dramatic ones, quiet ones. When someone repeatedly disrespects you, misses commitments, speaks carelessly, crosses lines, and nothing changes afterward, a lesson is taught. Not to them, but to you. The lesson is that tolerance without consequence becomes permission. Stoic clarity begins when you stop arguing with patterns and start responding to them. Quiet consequences are not punishments. They are adjustments. You don't announce them. You don't threaten. You simply reorganize access to your time, energy, and attention based on behavior. This is not withdrawal driven by resentment. It is alignment driven by self-respect. Seneca warned that constant tolerance of wrongs invites contempt. When disrespect meets no cost, it grows comfortable. Quiet consequences interrupt that comfort without escalating conflict. This practice often feels counterintuitive because it requires restraint. The urge is to explain, to correct, to confront, especially when something feels unfair. But confrontation keeps you engaged in the very dynamic that drains you. Quiet consequence steps outside it. In daily life, this looks simple but deliberate. Someone repeatedly cancels plans without consideration. You stop rearranging your schedule to accommodate them. A colleague speaks dismissively. You become less available for optional collaboration. A friend takes but never reciprocates. You reduce initiative. You don't disappear. You recalibrate. No speeches, no emotional displays, just consistency. The Stoic principle behind this is clear. You are responsible for what you allow to continue. Epictetus taught that freedom begins where dependence ends. If someone's behavior repeatedly disturbs your inner order, continued closeness is a choice, not an obligation. Quiet consequences also reveal truth. Some people notice the shift and adjust. Their respect increases because they sense a boundary that doesn't need to be announced. Others become confused or irritated, precisely because the old dynamic no longer works. And some drift away entirely. None of these outcomes require explanation. This is where many people struggle. They fear that reducing access is cruel or passive-aggressive. Stoicism draws a sharp distinction. Cruelty intends harm. Clarity intends order. You are not responsible for how others interpret your self-regulation. You are responsible for maintaining it. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the best revenge is to be unlike the one who wronged you. Quiet consequences are not revenge. They are refusal. Refusal to reward behavior that disrupts your peace. Importantly, this practice demands emotional cleanliness. If you impose quiet consequences while holding resentment, the energy leaks, tone changes, subtext creeps in. Stoic practice asks for something harder. Act without bitterness. Adjust without commentary. Let behavior speak to behavior. When done correctly, quiet consequences feel calm on the inside. There is no internal debate, no rehearsed arguments. You simply notice a pattern and respond by changing your level of engagement. Over time, this reshapes your relationships. You spend less energy managing others' moods. You stop negotiating basic respect. Your attention returns to what you can govern, your choices. This is the clarity phase of Stoic path. You are no longer reacting or explaining. You are arranging your life according to values. People who align with those values find a place near you. Those who don't lose proximity, not because you pushed them away, but because you stopped pulling them close. Quiet consequences teach a powerful lesson without words. Access is earned through consistency. And once this lesson becomes embodied, not explained, your environment changes. Fewer tests, fewer drains, more space, more order, not because the world became kinder, but because you became clearer. Practice 4. Be okay with not being liked. There is a quiet fear most people never name out loud. It doesn't look like panic or insecurity. It looks like politeness. It looks like flexibility. It looks like being easy to work with. But beneath it lives a powerful anxiety. What if they don't like me? Stoicism treats this fear not as a personality flaw, but as a point of bondage. The need to be liked keeps you emotionally available in ways you don't intend. It nudges you to soften boundaries, to tolerate small disrespect, to laugh things off when something actually hurts. And to someone paying attention, this fear is visible, not in your words, but in your adjustments. Toxic people rarely confront strength directly. They sense hesitation. Approval-seeking has a scent. It shows up in over-agreeing, quick apologies, nervous explanations, and the subtle reshaping of yourself to preserve harmony. When the fear of being disliked governs you, you can be steered. Stoicism offers a different posture, internal permission to be misjudged. Epictetus taught that if you want to be free, you must accept that some will misunderstand you. Freedom and universal approval cannot coexist. One requires self-command, The other requires constant adjustment. Being okay with not being liked does not mean becoming cold, arrogant, or dismissive. It means recognizing a boundary between kindness and self-erasure. You can be respectful without being compliant. You can be warm without being pliable. This practice often begins in small, uncomfortable moments. You say no and resist the urge to soften it. You express a preference and allow silence to follow. You stop correcting people's false assumptions about you when doing so costs your peace. These moments feel risky because they challenge an old survival strategy, blending in to stay safe. But Stoicism reframes safety. True safety is not social acceptance. It is inner stability. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself not to waste energy worrying about others' opinions when he was acting according to reason. Reputation is external. Character is not. When you confuse the two, you hand your center of gravity to the crowd. In practical life, the shift is subtle but profound. You stop chasing reassurance. You stop smoothing every edge of your personality. When someone reacts negatively to your calm boundary, you do not rush to repair their discomfort. You let it exist. This is where many people discover who is truly aligned with them. Those who value control, access, or emotional leverage often withdraw when approval is no longer available. The dynamic feels unsatisfying to them. Without your need to be liked, their influence collapses. Meanwhile, emotionally grounded people respond differently. They relax. They respect clarity. They don't require you to perform. Seneca warned against living in a way that requires constant applause. When your sense of worth depends on being liked, you live in reaction. When it depends on self-consistency, you live in choice. At first, releasing the need for approval can feel lonely. Silence replaces reassurance. Distance replaces familiarity. This is not failure, it is recalibration. You are shedding connections that existed only because you were accommodating yourself away. Stoic path calls this a necessary transition, not abandonment, but return. As you become comfortable with being disliked, your nervous system settles. Conversations slow down. Your words become fewer and more deliberate. You no longer scan for signs of rejection. You are present, not performing. This does not make everyone like you less. Paradoxically, it often makes the right people like you more. Calm, self-possession reads as confidence without aggression, clarity without apology. Being okay with not being liked is not indifference. It is independence. And once approval is no longer your currency, no one can bargain with it. Practice 5. Stop chasing. Be at home with yourself. There comes a moment when the exhaustion is no longer dramatic. You don't feel heartbroken or angry. You just feel tired of always being the one who reaches out, follows up, holds the thread of connection together. Tired of initiating conversations, adjusting schedules, keeping momentum alive, while telling yourself, this is just how relationships work. Stoicism names this clearly. Chasing is a signal of inner displacement. When you chase, your attention lives outside yourself. Your sense of value becomes tied to response times, invitations, and reactions. This doesn't mean you care too much. It means your center of gravity has drifted away from where it belongs. Toxic dynamics thrive on this drift. People who enjoy being pursued enjoy asymmetry. They accept effort without offering it. They grow accustomed to being chosen without choosing back. And as long as you keep chasing, the imbalance remains invisible because you are the one compensating for it. Stoic rebirth begins with a quiet return. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that no one can take from you what you do not hand over. Attention is something you hand over. Time is something you hand over. When you offer these continuously without reciprocity, you teach others how little resistance they will meet. Stopping the chase is not a strategy. It is a settling. You don't announce it. You don't withdraw to test reactions. You simply stop over-investing. You allow space where you once filled silence. You let others initiate or not. This is not indifference. It is trust in reality to reveal itself. At first, this space can feel uncomfortable. The mind searches for distraction. You wonder if you're being distant, selfish, or cold. But Stoicism reframes the discomfort. What you're feeling is the absence of external stimulation you once used to regulate your worth. Being at home with yourself means you no longer need constant engagement to feel grounded. Epictetus taught that if you seek your good outside yourself, you place it at the mercy of chance. Chasing is exactly that, a wager that others will return what you give. Stoic sufficiency removes the wager altogether. In daily life, this looks gentle and ordinary. You spend time on things that require no audience. You build routines that nourish you regardless of who notices. You choose rest without apology. Your days begin to feel full, even without constant interaction. Something important follows. People who only valued your availability begin to fade. The silence no longer feels empty to you, but it feels uncomfortable to them. Without pursuit, the dynamic offers them nothing. Meanwhile, something else happens quietly. People who genuinely value connection step forward, they initiate, they check in, they meet you halfway, not because you demanded it, but because you stopped carrying the relationship alone. Seneca observed that true companionship is found where effort is mutual. Chasing masks imbalance. Stillness reveals it. This practice marks the rebirth phase of Stoic path. You are no longer orienting your life around who responds, who approves, or who stays. You are rooted in your own rhythm. Relationships become additions, not anchors. Being at home with yourself does not make you isolated. It makes you selective. Your presence becomes quieter, heavier, more intentional. When you show up, it is by choice, not by need, and in that state, something settles deeply. You are no longer afraid of distance. You are no longer bargaining with your attention. You are not waiting to be chosen. You have already arrived. Taken together, these practices reveal a single Stoic truth that changes the entire dynamic. You don't push toxic people away. You stop inviting them in. Nothing you practiced was about correcting, confronting, or controlling others. Each step returned authority to where Stoicism says it belongs, your own inner governance. You paused instead of reacting. You spoke without justifying. You allowed consequences to exist without announcing them. You released the need to be liked. You stopped chasing connection to feel whole. In every case, the shift happened internally first. This is the Stoic distinction many people miss. Power is not exercised outwardly. It is stabilized inwardly. Stoicism does not teach resistance. Resistance still binds you to what you resist. It teaches firmness, an inner order so consistent that external chaos has nothing to attach to. When that order is in place, behavior reorganizes around it naturally. Not because you demanded it, but because disorder cannot sustain itself in the absence of permission. This is the core principle of Stoic path. When inner order is established, the outer world is forced to adjust. People who respect boundaries feel safer approaching you. They sense clarity without needing it explained. Those who rely on reaction, access, or emotional leverage begin to retreat. The interaction no longer feeds them, and some connections simply dissolve, not with drama, but with quiet inevitability. This is not loss, it is alignment. Notice what never happened. There were no speeches, no ultimatums, no attempts to be understood, just consistent behavior, repeated calmly over time. Stoicism works because it removes negotiation from places where negotiation never belonged. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, the task is not to manage others, but to govern oneself well. When you do, the environment follows. No declarations are required. No explanations are owed. Only coherence. And coherence, practiced steadily, changes everything. You don't need to become tougher than the people who test you. You don't need sharper words, stronger reactions, or a harder exterior. The real shift is quieter than that. You simply need to be less available to be pulled out of yourself. When your inner order is steady, provocation loses its grip. What once demanded energy now passes through without leaving a mark. This is the calm Stoicism points toward, not withdrawal, not indifference, but self-possession. You stop negotiating your peace in small moments. You stop giving emotional access to behavior that hasn't earned it. And without confrontation, without explanation, something changes around you. The noise thins out. The tests slow down. What no longer fits quietly falls away. Here is the Stoic line to carry with you this week. Stillness ends the invitation. Let that guide your actions, not as a rule, but as a reminder. You don't need to announce boundaries for them to exist. You don't need agreement for your choices to stand. Calm, practiced consistently, speaks before words ever do. Before you go, take a moment to reflect. Which practice will you apply this week to protect your inner order? If it helps, leave a comment with this line and let it anchor your intention. I choose steadiness over reaction. And if this way of living, quiet, grounded, and self-governed, resonates with you, like this video as a signal of that choice. Subscribe to Stoic Path to continue walking this path together, where clarity replaces chaos and inner order becomes a way of life.